within the biblical model, there is a picture that God has there for us. Now, God gives us these pictures because He knows that we need to hang on to something to understand. We look at the parables. The parables, how many of the parables start, and this is a rhetorical question, start with the kingdom of heaven is like? There's quite a few parables that start this way. The kingdom of heaven is like, because we need to grasp and hang on to these different pictures. How many times does God use the picture of things of everyday life to convey spiritual truths? So we have like a mother or a father, like a brother or a sister, like a friend, these different relationships that are to convey spiritual truths in the relationship to each other and then to our God. Then there is the work that we have. There is fishermen, there is farmers, there are metallurgists, there are merchants, there are a whole vast array of professions that are there to describe in a very practical sense what the work of God is. We think about sharing the gospel, and we think about fishermen, and we think about sowers. So farmers. And we think about these things, and when God says that we're to go out and we're to sow the seed, that sower in there is just spreading the seed. He's not worried about anything other than casting the seed. Wow, what a picture it is for us that's what we're supposed to do. Don't worry about some of the other things that are going on. Worry about casting the seed. We spread that seed. So now we're going to get to the picture of the wedding model. And what I want to share this morning, and we'll start with the class, and I will share the model. And then we will look at some of the practical things in the lesson this morning. And I understand that there's going to be questions, and that's perfectly fine. What I want us to do as we move through the model this morning is there's more information than I can share in 45 minutes. So if you will let me take notes, because you're gonna find spots where you're like, oh, that right there, that's in the Bible. That right here is this account with this person. And you're gonna see where the wedding model is coming out, and you're gonna see where it's different places where it fits within the life of Abraham or Isaac, whether it fits within a parable, whether it fits within other things that we find in the New and the Old Testament. And you're going to find it from Genesis to Revelation. You're going to find pictures of the wedding model all the way through, and I will cover that this morning. Genesis to Revelation. It's there through the entire Bible. Who is our groom? Who is our groom?
Jesus.
Yeah. And what is the church is called? The bride. All right, that right there should just set us up and give us a little bit of goosebumps to be like, okay, it all fits in this picture because Christ is our groom. And every bit of the wedding model that we see within the Bible is pointing us towards Christ. And then every part of this wedding model is going to talk about his bride and what his bride, who his bride is supposed to be. Now, I'm going to ask this question for you to think about in the back of your mind, and we'll carry it on through till the end of the lesson this morning. But what kind of bride is Christ returning for?
Spotless.
Spotless, yeah. A spotless bride. Okay. What does spotless mean? What are other, and just think about this for the moment, what are other adjectives that could be placed in there for spotless?
Cleansed.
Oh, cleansed, okay. How about antonyms now? Not synonyms, but antonyms, things that are opposite.
Unfaithful.
Unfaithful, ooh, I know, ooh, yeah. Which one of you said that? Yeah, unfaithful. Man, hope your mind is going to a whole lot of other places within the Bible right now, talking about unfaithfulness and so there's wedding model that we may, or wedding language that we may not even recognize. It's fitting right there. A bride is meant to be faithful. A groom is also meant to be faithful. So faithful, how about stained or tainted? Yeah? Okay. Now, when we consider this,
It's time to go in crazy when we were.
It's logged out. So, while this is working, let's, thank you very much. So while we're working through the wedding model, if you will take a note and you could just put on your notes and say, okay, this is like the bride selection or the bride price or the covenant vows and the verse or the passage or some reference. We're going to go through the entirety of the wedding model, and it'll take probably about 20 minutes if technology is good. It'll probably take about 15 minutes if technology is not good. It'll probably be something that I forget. But then we'll get into the point where we'll start putting in the verses that connect with it. And I guarantee you there's more verses than we have time in the next 45 minutes. They're just off. So it's a beautiful picture, but a lot of the Bible connects to this. Okay. Well, let's start. All right, there we go. Thank you very much. 2 Corinthians 11, verses 2 and 3. Paul here is writing to the church in Corinth, and he is writing this in a way to encourage the brethren there and to build them up. So, 2 Corinthians 11. For I am jealous for you with a godly jealousy. For I betrothed you to one husband, so that to Christ I might present you as a pure virgin. But I am afraid. I'm afraid that as the serpent deceived Eve by his craftiness, your minds will be led astray from the simplicity and the purity of the devotion to Christ. So in this, we have this picture right here that Paul is saying, and who is he writing to again? The Corinthian church. What kind of geopolitical, ethnic background were they compared to Palestine?
Mixed. They were Gentiles and Jews together, weren't they?
They were
Is
Gentiles
this
and
kind
Jews
of
together.
crossing area where people pass through a lot?
There were Gentiles and Jews there within the congregation. How about the city itself? Is it in Palestine? No, it's in the heart of Greece.
It's a bad place.
It's a bad place. What was in Greece? What kind of religious system? Pagan. Okay. So take the irony of this for a moment. Paul is saying, I want to present you as a pure, undefiled, what? Virgin. Oh, man, this is a completely new remaking that is going on. That is going on and remaking the bride. But he says, I fear that you will be led astray. So in this, we can make a conclusion. We can make a deduction that comes from this, that there is a pattern that Paul is referring them to. And that this pattern is something that is known, something that is beyond what is of the world, something that reflects back to God. So there is a pattern that they would know, and that Satan is going to hide from their sight. Satan is going to deceive them, and in his craftiness is going to tell them, that's not exactly what God intends. Or that might not be the best thing. Satan is going to use a lure to twist and pull them away. Has Satan changed his tactic? So are we under the same attack today? Would Paul's warning right here, would it be just as valid for this body today and the church in entirety within the entire globe today as it was for the church in Corinth in the first century? Absolutely. Absolutely. This is a timeless thing that Paul is saying, I am worried, I'm afraid that the serpent, the deceiver, the advocate that is going to be lying to you is going to twist and malign the message that you have so that you don't know the pattern. So, if there's a pattern, what's the pattern? What pattern is Paul referring to? And that's what we will look at here in a moment. So, stop me if you have a question, but I'm going to attempt to go through this quick. There will be questions. Stop me, because it's going to go quickly. It's going to be a timeline that we're going to look at. And the timeline begins with the Kiddushin, the selecting of the bride. We're talking about a culture that has arranged marriages, and this is entirely different for us today. We don't have arranged marriages, even though as parents now, I'm kind of liking the idea of an arranged marriage. Really liking that idea. But there's a lot of trust that has to go in this. So with the Kiddushin, this is the selecting of the bride, and you have the father of the groom who begins to survey the eligible women that are around and is looking to see if there is a bride or a potential bride that is worthy of his son. And in the course of this, there is probably some discussions that are being made between families, but ultimately it gets to the point where the young man reaches an age where he says, "Dad, this is the young lady that I want to pursue." And Dad probably says, "Are you sure?" And he's like, "Oh, yes." "Are you certain?" "Yes," because when we look at this, the young man, when he begins to approach the woman, he is committed. There's no turning back for him. He is committed. When he goes with his father and he goes to that young woman's house and they knock on the door, he cannot back out. He is committed to seeing this relationship through. I want to stress this. This is important to understand. The young lady can back out at any point within this. But when the young man approaches his potential bride, custom stated that he went through to pursue marriage. He was committed to the pursuit of that relationship. So when the father asks, "Are you sure?" "Yes. Yes, I am certain. We're going to approach this young lady." So the next thing that they did is they found the mohar, and which is a bride price. A bride price is different than a dowry. A dowry was given by the bride's family to the bride. It was meant to be a blessing to help the family along, and if opportunity presented, it would be replenished and passed on to the daughter of that woman later as life continued on. A bride price recognized that the bride's family was losing an integral member of the family, of their small-knit society. That this young woman, that whether she was an older sister or a younger sister, that somewhere within the house that she had a job that she was supposed to do. Either she looked over her younger siblings, or she looked over the children of her older siblings, or she looked over her nieces and nephews. Or maybe she went out and she took care of the animals and was a shepherdess. Or maybe she was out and doing other things within the family dynamic, but it was recognized that she had very material worth within the family, and that if she was to leave the family, there would be loss. And that the groom's family recognized that there was this loss, and they wanted to compensate for the loss of this bride within the bride's family. So the more affluent, or the more valuable the work of the bride was, the greater the bride price would be that would be paid to that family to say, "We see how much value this young lady has within your home, and we are going to pay this, or we're going to give this in order to offset the loss that she has, the loss that you feel from she being in a new family." So they would bring this price, and they would bring this bride price. The father and the groom would determine this before they even approached the bride and her family. They would also draw up the beginnings of a marriage contract. They would begin to discuss what the young man would bring to the relationship, and then what the young lady would bring to the relationship. They would begin to describe what the expectations were, how he would treat her, how she would treat him, what he would learn, what she would learn, how they would act together, how the families would act They would draw all this up so that when he knocked on the door, the young man knocked on the door of this bride, they had basically everything ready. Because what happens now, and this is very different than our society, when that young man knocked on the door, her father would stand there at the door, and he would look at his daughter, and she would see who it was that was knocking. And you can imagine the whispers that are going on within the house. If she is the oldest daughter, and there's maybe 5 or 6 other younger kids, and some of those are daughters behind her, ooh, so-and-so's at the door, so-and-so's at the door, ooh, he's knocking, oh, what are you going to say, what are you going to say? And the dad's like there, yeah, he's here, and she might be saying, and the father's looking at his daughter, and she's probably off at the side, kind of peering, and he's looking like, do I open this door? Do I open this door for this young man? Because the custom went, if the door was opened, then for all intent and purposes, a marriage contract was worked out that evening. If the daughter didn't want the young man, the door would remain closed. The young man wouldn't knock again. He and his father would leave, they would not come back again, because the decision would be made. I'm not worthy. She does not see me worthy. She does not desire me. She does not want me. So the door would remain closed. But if that door was open, if she said, yes, Dad, why are you taking so long? Open the door! Open that door. Let him in. And fathers in the room, can you imagine the joy we could have at that moment? Oh, the door's stuck. The door's stuck. The door's stuck. I can't get it. Oh, where's the key? Oh, the bar on the door is not lifting. I can't do it. Yeah, I mean, we can have all sorts of fun. But this was a very serious moment, because when that door was opened, they would come in, and immediately what would happen is they would begin the covenant process, the negotiations. And there would be a series of cups of covenant, of wine that would be shared in order to express the joy and the intensity of the moment. The first cup would be a cup that would be shared between the groom and his father, and then the entire household of the bride. And this would be showing a unity between the two families of bringing these two together and for this relationship to work. Later on in the negotiations, there would be a second cup that would be shared. And this would be as they are working out the more specific details of the wedding vows and the contracts that they're going to have. And that they are working through these things, and this is what the bride is going to bring, and this is what the groom is going to bring. I hope your minds are working through all this, because there's a lot of passages that we're talking about brides and what the bride does and what she brings to the marriage. And it kind of reflects right back here to this covenantal process and the wedding vows and the wedding model. Here we have this the cups that are being shared, and this second cup, there would be a really strong tie and strong bind that would be made between the two families as they shared bread and as they shared this second cup. They would make a salt covenant at this point. Now, salt was something that was very important within ancient cultures. What does salt do? It preserves. Okay, it preserves meat. What else does salt do? It clears, it cleans. Yeah. What else was salt? It's a necessary electrolyte. Yeah. It's necessary for life. It preserves, it cleans. There's another one that was very interesting. Because of its value, salt was one of the first forms of currency. You could trade salt for value. You could buy things with salt. It was one of the first forms of money and currency. So nearly every man carried a pouch of salt at his belt because it was useful. So he had his flint, he had his knife, he had his pouch of salt. So the father of the groom and the father of the bride, they would pull out their salt pouches. And when they pull out these salt pouches, they would go ahead and pull them out, and they'd have them there in their hand, and they would go ahead and they would take a pinch of salt, and they would take it and they would put it in your bag. There, you got some pinch of salt in your bag. And then you would take a pinch of salt and you would put it in my bag. And what they would indicate right here is that they would, if they wanted to sever the ties of these two families, they would say, we have to give back each grain of salt that was originally yours. And you would have to give me each grain of salt back that was originally mine. And as you look at this right here and you think about it, like, that's just absurd. How can I give each individual grain of salt back that was original? Well, that's the point. So you didn't enter this lightly. But what you're entered into and said, our families are so committed to this relationship that we are going to do what needs to be doing to see this relationship grow and work. There's no backing out. There's no going away. Would kind of make us think twice before we enter into that kind of covenant, wouldn't it? Yeah. But that was the point at the moment, that when you got to that mark, there was no real turning away. But the young lady could still back out at this moment. She could still say no. That's interesting. Her family can make that covenant, but the young woman can still back out. It's a lot of power that's placed on her at this moment. The third cup that comes is when the agreement between the bride and the groom is finally made. And they both agree that they are willing to enter into this covenantal relationship together. And they share this third cup. And they proclaim it as a new covenant because it's a covenant that is being brought together of their two houses. And they're making this covenant before their fathers and before God. So here is this new covenant that is being made. And it's being made of joining these two together, and now the two become one. And the two they haven't left father and mother yet, but for all intent and purposes, they are wed. He gives her the bride price. She gives the bride price to her father. If he were to die, she would inherit as his widow. That they're married at this point. She is no longer an eligible young lady. He is no longer an eligible bachelor. But it's going to be a year before before they share a home together. It's going to be at least a year. Because there's some things that have to happen. Okay, so the consent of the bride is given. They're now in they've made this covenant together, and the groom gives okay, technology is jumping around. That's okay. You look like you got a question.
So the consent of the bride, this is sometime after that first night, which had all the other
It's
stuff.
all the same night.
All the same night, okay.
So the groom gives the bride price. That's all in that first night. Then the groom grows to prepare a place for his bride. That's all the first night. That's all that night that they meet. And the two fathers sit down and they work out the covenants and they work out the marriage contract. There's a lot of things going on that night. And in custom, as the custom goes, this would have been really the first public declaration that the two had desires for each other. So when you think about courtship, there was no courtship before the wedding. Very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. The bride, or the groom goes to prepare a place for his bride. So the groom is a young man and he needs to go and he needs to make a house for his bride. And he's going to go with his father. And they go and they begin preparing and giving, he goes and begins building. While he's going to be gone, he gives this gift to his bride to remind her of him. He gives this gift because it's going to take a while. It's going to take about a year for this home to be built. Sometimes it took more than a year, depending on how the young man was and how efficient he was at building, or how immature he was and how much growing he needed to have happen, that it took a little bit of time. And the father would work with him on these things. The groom would give this gift, and the bride would go ahead and hang on to that gift, and she would hang on to that gift, and she would hold it. And you can imagine how this would be. That young lady in the first 3 or 4 weeks, she would be, ooh, I've got my gift, and my man is building, and he's working, and he's setting stone, and he's putting plaster, and he's doing these things, and he's making a home just specific for us. And you can imagine how her heart is kind of building in this. Now, imagine where it would be at like 10 and a half months. He's been working on this. She may not know exactly what's going on. For you ladies in here, if you're anything like my sisters or my wife or other women that I know, there's some questions that come along. You want to know what's going on. How long does it take to put 4 walls in a roof? It doesn't have to be perfect. Come on. Get on the ball. 4 walls and a roof. That's all I'm asking for. It doesn't rain much in Palestine. Come on. You don't even need a full roof. Just half of the roof has to be watertight. And she's hanging on to that gift and like, oh, does he still love me? Does he still love me? Has he forgotten about me? Has he forgotten about... Oh, he can't forget about me. He can't... But she has that gift, and just imagine how that gift is for the need of her heart. Because what's Satan going to do? Satan's going to be right there whispering, like, oh, he's forgot about you. He's sending flowers to some other young lady. Oh, he's got eyes that are wandering. And maybe Satan's put some of these things there for her also. Oh, he's forgotten about me, so I need to start thinking about something else. But no, she's holding on to that gift, and she hangs on to that gift. While the groom is building, the bride is becoming set apart for him. So this picture of being kiddushin, being set apart. And this is a lovely picture that's here. She is learning what the groom needs and what the groom would like. He is learning what the bride needs and what the bride would like. They are learning their respected traits and what they're going to bring into this. But she is being set apart for her groom. She is a young lady who is no longer on the market. She is an old married woman at this point. Even though she has not had her wedding feast, she is an old married woman. In fact, really, this is what she should be thinking about. See me as an old married woman. So, does her dress change? Does her actions change? Does the way she carry herself change? Does she still go out with the other young maidens and kind of go and draw water in the same way and have the same gaiety of life? Maybe not. Because she's not a young maiden anymore. She might not have experienced her wedding night yet, or had her home and her groom come and take her. But she's no longer a young maiden. She's a married woman. She's not available. She should not be presenting herself for other men to look at and see as desire. She's off the market. She wants only her husband's eyes to be looking to her. And the groom is thinking the same way. My eyes are only for my bride. I'm not looking at other women. I'm not associating with the other young bachelors anymore. I'm not off doing those different things. I'm now an old married man. I got to build my house. This is the easy part, because now I got to fill my house after I build my house, and then all the things that go along with this. And here's the picture that is really kind of awesome within this. You know when the house is finished? You know who determined when the house was finished? Only the father of the groom. In fact, it's a Hebrew idiom when young men are saying, when are you going to go get your bride? Only my father knows the day and the hour. Only he knows, and that is literally the Hebrew idiom that is there. Only the father knows the day or the hour. Yeah, I see it, the lights are coming on, you're like, wait a second, that's really cool. Only the father knows the day or the hour. So he's working on this, and young men might be a little bit distraught, and the young ladies might be a little bit distraught, but the father in his wisdom is saying, you're ready. She's ready. We're ready. All things are ready. And then when the Father says, it's time, what do you think happens? Well, before that happens, the bride is going through a process where she is washing herself ceremoniously. And she is washing off the old identity and becoming a new creature. Very interesting language again. She is washing herself. It's a mikvah. And it's a washing that is a cleansing that goes on. And this cleansing is to cleanse off the old identity of who she was. And that now she is a bride. And she is presenting herself pure and spotless to her groom. And that she has this washing that goes on. Finally, the Father says, it's time. And the Father says, go get your young bride. Now, do you think that the young man just went and picked up his bride? I could see a smirk, like, no, you cannot rob the young lady of her excitement. Because this is the moment, as a young woman, she has been waiting for. The news that her groom is coming for her. This is her moment to be truly excited and to be presented in her radiant beauty. The announcement that the groom is coming, the groom is coming. There's going to be these little things that come and say, little whispers that are coming from wherever the groom's family is. That might be on the other side of town, it might be the next town over, but wherever it comes, there's some kind of word that comes and says, the groom is coming. Be ready and be prepared. The groom is coming. And he comes, and he is coming in all of his glory, and he is coming, and the bride is washing herself again, making herself ready, and now she's in her radiant gowns and clothing, and she is ready for her groom to come. This is her moment. And the groom comes, and he knocks on the door, and he takes her back to his father's house, back to the home that he has been building. Okay, back to the home that he has been building, and they have their wedding ceremony under the wedding covering of huppah, and they have this ceremony together, and then they have this wedding feast that comes for the next 7 days. And they have this feast that's together where everybody is excited and celebrating the union of these two together, and that they, even though they've been married for the last year, they are now together, and they have that union that they've been excited about and anticipating with longing and with joy. So, okay, I did get through. And we get a moment. Where did your mind go with the different imagery? Maybe I should ask, was there questions about the wedding model first, or was that pared down simply enough that was understandable? There's a whole lot more. Okay, no questions or hands. Has anybody heard this before? Is this old news to? It's old news. Okay. Did I miss the mark? Okay. All right. Wedding imagery that is there. Where did your mind go as we were talking about these different passages? Or not passages. What passages came to mind as we were talking about these different events within the wedding law? You have some. You have several. Nobody else is going to jump in. Go ahead.
Well, it's becoming a Christian. It's the process of following Christ for the donkey that kind of reminded me of that, the procession.
Okay.
And, just the Christ coming back for us preparing a place for us.
John 14 is a chapter that is almost entirely of wedding. It's to prepare a place for you in my Father's house. Some translations say many mansions. Really, it should be translated as rooms. We don't want mansions in heaven. We want rooms. Do you want a mansion on a hill away from God, or do you want to be in a room in the house where the Lord is dwelling? I want to be in the room in the house where the Lord is dwelling. I don't care if it's a small house. I want to be there. I want to be there in His presence. And that's the picture that's there. And what Jesus is saying right here in John 14, He's saying, this is wedding language where He's saying, I go to prepare a place for you. Now, this might have been odd because He's speaking to His disciples, but in this that He's speaking to them, He is saying that this is the relationship that we have. This is the bridegroom relationship is the one that God has intended for us. And I go to prepare a place for you. Drop down in chapter 14 to verses 16 through 31. If you're familiar with John's discourse there, you recognize in verses 16 through 31 that this is talking about the Holy Spirit. This is talking about, but what does Jesus say there in those passages? He says that the Holy Spirit is a gift that I give to you. Is this a bridal gift that He is giving? Well, it's not a question that the Holy Spirit is a bridal gift that He is giving. It's necessity for us. How are we to remember our groom's love and His face without the Holy Spirit there for us to interact with and to see Him? But then also, how are we to change into the bride that He is calling us to be without the work of His Spirit to help us? Oh man, did we just open up and dig into some deeper things? Yeah. Okay, what other, Acts 1 and verse 7. What is, Jesus is asking the question there. The disciples ask Him, when will you return? Is basically, I'm paraphrasing. But what does Jesus say in Acts 1 and verse 7? No one knows but the Father. The Father alone knows the day and the hour. He's using wedding language right there that is going to say, hey, this is the relationship that we have. I go to do this work. You need to prepare, but God has a plan. So, here's an interesting thing that becomes very important for us to consider. Very important for us to consider. We think of, and we say sometimes, someday Christ will return. But if God knows and there is intention, should it be one day Christ will return? Is there a difference between someday and one day? There's absolute difference between someday and one day. Someday implies chance. One day implies purpose. Someday implies that there's an amount of time that goes that is meant to be, that's not entirely understood. One day means that there is plan and purpose and that there is meaning. And though we may not understand the meaning, there's somebody who does. And He is entirely in control. You know what it also means? If we think about it in the wedding model, it means the Father's looking and says, the groom, or the bride for the groom here, the bride for my son, is not yet ready. I'm giving more time for the bride to be ready. I'm giving more time for the bride to grow. I'm giving more time for the bride to mature. I'm giving more time for the bride to be set apart. I'm giving more time for the bride to be washed. Is that a blessing for you and I? Absolutely. Is that a blessing for your children? Absolutely. Is it a blessing for generations to come? Until the day. It is a blessing. Any other passages or thoughts or we've gone over time, but that's not new for me.
Good question.
Go right ahead.
A couple questions. One is, what ages is this happening for these individuals? And two, I'm assuming it's kind of young, And so, where is the groom getting all this value that he's giving away? He gives the bride a trinket and the family stuff. Maybe that's paid for by the dad, family to family, but he's got to build a house. He's got to get it ready. He gives a gift to her at the end before the wedding. So before the ceremony. So where's all this? Is he old enough to have got any of this wealth that he's passing on to the bride and the bride's family?
Well, let me ask you, where do you think it comes from?
Well, that's what's kind of I'm having a problem. I'm kind of wondering, is that coming from the father's family?
Yes, entirely.
Okay.
Entirely from the father's family. Which, again, follow this. Does all provision come from the Heavenly Father?
Sure.
All provision comes from the Heavenly Father. So here, the Father gives everything. Think about the bride price that is made. This is the only thing that the Son pays. Yeah.
So in the Bible it says that a man is to his father and mother and enjoy his wife. So is that a different tradition then? Because it says the groom will come for the bride.
So in this, all right. Look, we're out of time. No. This is most definitely part of the same deal. So when a man is to leave his father and mother, he is under the authority of his father, and now the picture that God gives is he is to cling to his wife. The two now become one entity, and it's separate. He is no longer of his father's household. Even though he might still recognize he's under his father's authority, he's his own separate household. The two are now one. And when we look at the picture that goes along with this of the man and the woman being joined together, she becomes his helpmeet. And we often put in helpmate, but the picture with the helpmeet is a very interesting picture, because now you find that the husband and wife are now face to face. They have this intimacy in working together through things. And really the picture that comes is he is the right wing, she is the left wing on a bird that is moving forward. That's an analogy that others have given, but there is that picture that they're now their separate own entity, though they may be under the father or under the patriarch. And so his father may be under his father still. Think about the life of Abraham or the life of Isaac or Jacob. How many generations did you have living together? You might have 3 generations very easily living within a marriage covenant relationship together. And but that still meant that man and woman were now considered one. They had the right to separate or to submit to the authority of the patriarch. Does that answer? Okay. How long am I allowed to keep going? Because I can go for another hour. Do we go until the kids get upset? Okay. All right, so real quick as I wrap this up. From Genesis to Revelation, Abraham sends away Isaac's bride. Abraham sends his servant to Sarah's household to get a bride for Isaac. Abraham recognized there is no potential bride among the Canaanites, these pagan worshipers that I want for my son. Go get a bride from Sarah's household. How many camel loads of riches were taken to go get Rebekah? There's quite a few. I believe it was 7. I might be wrong. It's one of those biblical numbers like 3, 7, 12, 144,000. It was either 7 or 12. But it was a load of riches that was sent. Okay. Rebekah receives a gift of a bracelet and she agrees to come back and marry Isaac. Has she ever met Isaac? When she leaves her father's household, she is a married woman. Because she's coming back. She is the bride of Isaac. But she hasn't seen him. Ooh, yeah, it's an interesting thing. Now, Revelation, and it's up there, Revelation 3 and verse 20. Jesus there, he is in the midst of the letters to the churches, the 7 churches. And here in this one, he says that he stands at the door knocking. He stands at the door knocking. All right, this is wedding language for a moment, because Christ is standing at the door and he's knocking. Are we going to let him in? And this is different than just I'm standing at the door and I'd like to have dinner with you. What he's saying is, I'm standing at the door and I want to have a covenantal relationship with you. I have brought everything with me and I'm standing at the door. I have brought everything to make this relationship work. It's your choice whether you will let me in. It's your choice whether you will submit and surrender and pursue a life with me. It's your choice whether you will follow and whether we will have this union together. But I'm standing at the door and I have brought everything. The Father has sent everything. The bride price has been paid. And we're going to talk about that in the lesson. But how great of a bride price has been paid for us. That price was paid to show our worth and value. And we are going to focus on that really, really well this morning. So there, from Genesis to Revelation, trying to put the two together for a moment, but from Genesis to Revelation, there's the picture. At the end of Revelation, what is happening there with them? There's something between the lamb and there's some kind of feast that's going on between the lamb and help me out here. The wedding feast. I knew what it was. I just want somebody else to toss it in. The wedding feast between who?
Bride and groom.
The bride and the groom. The Lamb of God and the bride. Who's the bride? Okay, this is where I want us to start thinking about a different word than just church. Because sometimes within our culture today, we think of church and we think of the structure right here. The Greek word ekklesia never means structure. The Greek word ekklesia always means body or people. Always. Always. Ekklesia. They might be in a riot, but the building was not in a riot. Ekklesia always means people. So we, the people, the body, we are the bride. So again, the question that comes, what kind of bride is Christ coming back for? Is he coming back for an Egyptian bride, a Babylonian bride, a Roman bride, a bride of the world? Or is he coming back for a bride that is set apart? A bride that has been removed and sanctified. A bride that is clean. A bride that looks different. A bride that dresses different, speaks differently, acts differently, is differently in every way. All right, so I have to stop. I will keep going for another hour. But thank you.
Thank you.